Hello, everyone. Welcome to part two of emotions webinar, our two foundational webinars on emotions. And today we're going to be jumping into some very, very practical applications of emotions. We're going to be talking about how to write an emotions insight statement. We'll put some meat around that and look at a couple of examples. I'm Greg Stuckey. I'm Chief Research Officer at Insights Now, and really delighted to be with you here again today. And at the end of this webinar, you should have a few, hopefully, very new tools, maybe some things that you hadn't thought about in terms of how do I actually go from qualitative open-end comments or conversations that I have with people and quantitative emotions data. How do I go from that to a statement that I can put into a report, or communications statements that I can make to colleagues? How can I get to something where emotions is insightful and I can communicate why that's valuable to my people? All right, so as always, there is on the side of your screen here a question area. You are welcome to ask questions as we go through. I'll try and incorporate those right away when I can, but I'll also leave some time at the end to answer any questions, so please type away. Quick review. Last week, if you were with us, you remember that we looked at what emotions were and what emotions were not. And one of the things that we talked about was this particular layout of information so that you could look at the different types of affect that consumers often use, or we as people just in general often use. And we're using the same words to describe a lot of different things. So this allows us to make sure that we're really focusing on if they're talking about an emotion, a mood, an attitude, or just their temperament as a person. And just a real quick recap, this is organized from slow to change to fast change. So your temperament, your personality is very slow to change. Your attitudes, again, a little slower to change. Your moods and emotions, much faster to change. And then you can tell the difference between the slow and fast ones by looking at whether they're projected at something or whether they're not projected. So your temperament is about who you are as a person. There's no projection, but your attitudes about products, about people, about brands, they're projected on those elements. Your mood, same thing. Just feeling happy right now, that's my mood. It's not projected on any particular object or thing. Whereas my emotions, hey, this particular thing makes me feel happy. Eating this food makes me feel happy. My cup of coffee makes me feel happy. All of those component pieces, those emotions, because they're projected on something and they're fast and fleeting. The other thing to keep in mind that we talked about last week was how emotions are elicited. And when we look at emotions, they occur as a result of you appraising something. And those appraisals happen in context, in a moment, with all the things that are happening and priming you as you go through. So your concerns, your goals, your attitudes, your ideals are coming into that appraisal process. Your expectations that you have, anything that you've been primed with, anything that's in your memory bank, all come in as part of that appraisal process. And then when you experience some sort of a stimulus, right, have an experience, perceive something, an aroma coming at you, or if you have an outcome, an event, right, something that hits you as the outcome of an experience, all of those things, those drive into that appraisal process, and you're constantly appraising the world around you and your experience and the objects and the people, and that's what's driving those emotions forward. So what's really important for innovators to think about is as from a simple process, and as we get into writing emotions insight statement, is thinking about, well, what are those cues, right? The concerns, the stimulus, the expectations. What are those factors that I can write about as being influencers of that emotion? And what are the internal and external contexts that I can leverage to explain why that matters to the people at all? Now, with all emotions work that you do, one of the things that you're going to need to put in place in your innovation programs is you're going to need to understand what are your basic emotions. You're going to have a standard set that's well defined, and you're going to need to understand, here's the emotion and this is how it gets elicited in a person. This is how it's defined. The set that we love to use is Peter Desmet's set from 2005. It gives us good consistency in communication. There's a lot of good sets. This set might be too scientific for your group. This might be not scientific enough for your group, and you need maybe different layers for the types of products or services you offer. So this is a great starting point. If you don't have anything, certainly go to this. It's a nice, concise, tight list, well researched, well published, so you can get into the science behind it. But one of the things that you do need is that standard, because it is really important to understand the difference between when is a person talking about satisfaction or disappointment. Like, those two things are fundamentally different. Now, consumers might not use those words, but we as researchers need to know how to transform into that language. Now, last week, we also talked about understanding that what emotions are and what they're not. And we also talked about how they're elicited. And one of the things we talked about was the fact that innovation is really thriving on emotional intelligence, because products and innovations that are successful are really emotionally relevant to people. Now, you can have some good trial of products that don't connect emotionally, but if you really want your product or innovation to stick, to change a person's lives, to make their lives better, you've got to be able to connect very well emotionally. So last week we talked a little bit more about understanding emotions, what they are. We just zipped through that super quick, how emotions are elicited through that appraisal process. And today we're going to be spending a little more time on measuring and applying those emotions. And we're going to spend actually a lot more time on the apply part, because that's where things come to life. All right, so emotional intelligence. One of the things that's fundamental that people often forget about is that you've got to have some sort of a standard. You have to have some type of a framework in order to understand emotions. And at Insights Now, this means it needs to be a behavioral framework, because I don't want to elicit emotions or have an emotional experience with an innovation if it's not going to impact the behavior that a person has, if it's not going to improve frequency of use, if it's not going to improve maybe word of mouth communication, if it's not going to improve maybe how they live their life or the value they get out of their life. So we always want to impact their behavior in a positive way, right? Reduce some negative things that they're experiencing, enhance positive experiences for people. That requires a framework. So let's jump into the framework that we use. We use what's called the Emotions Insights Wheel. And this wheel is focused specifically on helping you translate and organize emotional information that you get out of innovation research to be able to communicate those insights. This is not a wheel where you're just going to go and say, what are all the emotional lexicon words? This isn't an emotional lexicon. Emotional lexicons, those are great. There's thousands of words consumers talk about emotions. You're going to want to have some of those at your disposal as well. But this is about translating and communicating and getting to emotions insight statements that are useful for people. So let's talk through how this is built. The base of this is 4 core quadrants. And if you've done work with need states, with jobs to be done, any of those traditional classical spaces, you'll probably recognize that these match up with those, right? If you think about jobs to be done as an example, you've got functional jobs that products do, sensorial jobs that products do, social jobs they do, and psychological jobs. So a product can do one or many of these particular jobs. In some of the early jobs to be done work, they made it really famous that a milkshake helps keep you awake while you're on a drive, right? That's a very functional job. Other products, a lot of the things we use can have very social jobs, deliver pride in like who you are, self-associate your particular personality, et cetera, so forth. So understanding where that comes from, and remember when we're talking about emotions elicitation, you also got the component pieces of how that product is coming to life. The concerns, the goals, the expectations. Oh, I forgot to turn on my camera today. I should do that as well. There we go. Got that coming going. So hi everybody again. All right, let's take the next part. The next part of the emotions insights wheel is the centerpiece. And one of the things that's important to understand is if you're using this to understand for the consumer or you're using this to understand your own corporate goals, are you actually with this innovation, are you more trying to increase desire, right? The want of this object, or are you trying to decrease disgust? Are you trying to decrease some negatives? There's a lot of products on the market that really as their primary value is actually decreasing some negative that's out there. And understanding which way you want to go, that's really important to understanding emotions, right? If part of my experience is something it's a pretty negative things, you may want to, like cleaning products, you may want to clean. A lot of personal care products are about reducing disgust rather than increasing desire. All right. The next ring out is the projection. Remember, all emotions are always projected at something. And one of the things that's interesting is that if you overlay this with the four quadrants, you'll notice that there's in three of the four quadrants, you've got just really you're projecting at the product itself or the outcome of the experience as a whole. So you're either focusing on product qualities or you're focusing on the overall experience. Now, when it comes to social, though, and we think about the types of jobs, you also have people that get in the mix here. So if you're projecting on a brand, that's a social thing. If you're projecting on yourself, that falls into that social quadrant. So all in addition to product and experience, you've got the social elements coming in over there as well. And then let's take a look at what emotions then, and this again is using the Peter Desmet list of emotions that you saw earlier, which emotions fall into what space. So if I look at understanding which specific emotion I want to target in a specific conversation with a person, or as I look at maybe the open ends that a person had or the data that they have, if, for instance, in the functional quadrant, if you have a product-oriented projection, it's going to be either liking, disliking, or satisfaction, dissatisfaction. Whereas if I'm talking about the experience as a whole, that's where now enjoyment, which is a slight difference from liking, right? It's a different experience. Liking's about a product or a product quality. Enjoyment's about an experience as a whole. Or I may have fear relief. This is where anticipation emotions come in, right? You come in with a fear that something might happen, and if that's not realized, I get relief. I may have hope that a certain experience will happen, and then maybe be disappointed when it doesn't. So you've got those anticipation and experience emotions connected in those areas. And you can see as the emotions fall through and around this circle, how that goes. So one of the things we like to do is be able to connect then those emotions to what's cueing that emotion. So you want to be able to say, if I'm have a product and it's being disliked, what is the functional elements that are driving that forward? So just as a real quick recap of how we tend to use this, number one, we identify, well, what quadrant, like if I'm working with open-end conversations, what are they talking about? Are they talking about something social about this? Are they talking about functional things? Is this a psychological experience they're talking about? What are they talking about? What is the goal? Are they talking positively or negatively? It's more about, are they talking about trying to reduce something negative in their life? Are they trying to enhance something positive in their life? What is the projection? Is it on the product and the qualities of the product, or are they talking more generically about the experience as a whole, or a process as part of the experience, right? Or are they talking about a person specifically? Right? And then which emotions are they talking about? Because they may use, like we saw before, the word happy is all the way through it. Well, which emotion is that? And I may use the same word to describe enjoyment as I use to describe liking. And if, as a researcher, if you can use this wheel to decouple, oh, well, they're actually talking about an entire experience, so it's not really liking, it's enjoyment. That will help standardize the way you communicate, and it will also help you understand if I'm making changes and trying to improve my innovation, am I actually getting to the right thing, right? Am I putting my focus in the right area, or am I getting to the right elements? And then you want to connect those emotions to the cues. So what is triggering that? And this is one of the things that I see a lot of researchers miss, and the reasons like emotion insight statements are really hard for people is they skip over the idea that they have to connect it to something. They may say, oh, people like the texture of this product. You're missing the connection. So what? Why does that matter? So connecting then the emotion to those cues is an important part. So oh, yeah, it could be any behavior motivator. So let's take a look. So one idea here as an example, liking of the product. So if I say, hey, I'm moving, this is a sensory component piece, liking of the product is cued by the sweetness, which addresses my need for energy, right? So you're connecting sweetness to energy and liking. So you're connecting all those dots together. Another one might be a very stimulating or intriguing experience is being cued by the interesting preparation steps, which offsets my boredom. So maybe I've developed an innovation where the process of using the product is really fascinating and stimulating. That's more of a psychological experience, and you can see you're connecting the cues and the desires and the concerns people have. Or maybe I feel ashamed of myself when I eat cookies that are high in sugar, which are not really in line with my diet. So again, you're connecting the emotion to what the projection is, to what the cues are, that are driving that, and why that matters to a person. Okay. So let's jump right into what a lot of you are, I know, coming here for, because I talked with a lot of you before you came in. Uh, this is the rubric that we like to use. And don't get too hyper specific with the connecting words, right? You're gonna have to make this good English at the end of the day, but you really need to focus on finding out 4 key things: the emotion, the projection, the cue, and then what the concern or the expectation is that's driving that. And so then we have just a simple rubric here, the emotion connected with whatever the projection is cued by blank, which addresses blank. So let's go through some examples. The best way to look at this rubric is to see how it comes to life. I'm going to show you how I use it, and we're going to be using a plant-based burger study. We're going to be using some open ends from that, as well as some data from that, and we're going to be talking through how to translate that into structured statements. This plant-based burger study, to give you a little context on it, we had recruited a group of people who were using plant-based burgers, and but none of those people had tried Beyond Burger yet. And this was when Beyond was just doing their big launch and moving really fast in the market. So they were regular users of the category. We had them evaluate their current product. So we were expecting reasonably positive emotions because it's the product that they like to use. And then we gave them Beyond Burger as a new product that they hadn't tried. So we couriered that to their door. They got to use it in their house, and then they evaluated that. So let's meet a couple of people. First, let's meet Maggie. And Maggie here really is a person where she's like, I use veggie patties all the time. Notice they don't talk about them as plant-based. A lot of people in this category call them veggie burgers, right? So veggie patties, they're really easy to find. It doesn't look or smell much like a real burger, and it only tastes good once I add stuff to it, right? So it's really interesting that this is her go-to products. So why is she using something that, quote, doesn't taste good? Well, that's because, they feel like they're building her health, right? So she's willing to make a trade-off of something that's not so great for the benefit that that provides. Okay, so let's take a look at what she said when she jumped into her first Beyond Burger experience. She says, I was really impressed with Beyond Burger. From the minute I opened the package, it was really meaty, nice size. It cooked up in the pan really nice. And then underlined a couple of key pieces. It smelled really great while cooking it, and it had a nice smoky smell. So if we go to our rubric and we take a look at her commentary, both in her historical information of where she's at as a person, as well as her experience with the product, we can handpick a few things. So I'm going to just handpick some. There's obviously quite a few emotions being described here, quite a few cues. I'm just going to pick some so that we can, essentially series, so that we can write a statement and you can see how it's done. So if the emotion is, it smelled great while cooking. So smelling great. Okay, what does great mean? Is great liking? What emotion is that, right? We'll use the wheel to get there. Smelled great while cooking. The projection, it's the Beyond Burger, right? Very simple. Q, it's got a nice smoky smell. So what caused that to smell great? It's the smoky smell. And what cue or concern or expectation is that addressing? Well, it's, if we go back to her original commentary about her current experience is that the veggie burgers, her current burgers that she is using, is they don't smell or taste much like a real burger. So there's a gap there. So she's actually talking about the smell. It's got a great smell, and this is more in line than with a real burger. Okay, so let's take a look then. If we go through the spaces and start breaking this down, she's got the quote, smelled great while cooking. Well, what area? Is that a functional property? Is that social? Is it psychological? Is it sensory? Well, I certainly think it's pretty obvious that particular one is a sensorial experience, something that you're addressing. Is this more desire or reducing disgust? Right? It doesn't smell much like a real burger, only tastes like a good one that I add spices to. She's actually, interestingly enough, talking about something that she has as an existing experience that's a disgust. So we're going to be taking that away, right? So we're not enhancing a positive, we're actually removing a negative. Hopefully that makes sense to you, right? So am I enhancing a positive or removing a negative? In this case, this product experience that she's talking about is removing a negative in her life that she's talking about. And that's an important distinction when it comes to understanding how to communicate, how to advertise, how to get relational with these people. Finally, we can look at, or sorry, not finally, but next we can look at projections, right? So what is the projection? Is it the experience as a whole, or is it an element of the product? This is actually tricky for most people to think through because everything sounds like an experience and everything sounds like a product attribute. The way I help people think through this is to say, look, if it's about a specific quality of the product, a specific thing, like this is just the smell of the product. That's not the whole experience. That doesn't include all elements of that entire experience. It's just one aspect. You're most likely talking about a product element. Whereas if somebody's talking about something that's process, a series of steps, a sequence, a start and a finish, in those cases, you're probably talking about the experience, okay? So think about it as process versus attribute or quality. All right, so she's talking about the product. So now we need to get into what specific emotions is she talking about, right? So we've got under product, it could be either sensory liking or sensory satisfaction. We know she was positive here, smelling great, so it's on the positive side here. So what we want to do is go back to the eliciting conditions and look at the definitions of these two. So liking is defined as love or liking of an appealing object, whereas satisfaction is an expected goal realization or concern match. Now, in her commentary, was there a goal that she was talking about being accomplished? No, it just smelled great. So she wasn't saying, I was looking for real meat smell and it smelled just like real meat. Like that would have been satisfaction. But just smelling great, that's just love or liking of something appealing. Okay, so she's talking about liking in this particular situation. Okay, now the next question is then what's driving or motivating or contextualizing this emotion? And in this particular element, I underlined two pieces, right? Not looking or smelling much like a real burger, right? That's her prior experience, and being healthy for her in the environment. Okay, well, this one, smelling great, nice smoky smell, is really attending more towards those elements that a real burger should smell like, and that her current veggie burgers don't smell that way. So now we go back to the rubric. Let's start filling in the information. What are the key pieces? Emotion, it's about liking. Projection, it's the Beyond Burger, right? The cue is the smoky smell while cooking, right? She said that was, she called that out specifically as why it smelled great. And then the concern is really connecting, we're massaging language, right? To write insight statements. Healthy veggie burgers don't smell good, right? That's what we know from her overall statement and concerns. So now we can put this into that rubric and make a statement. Liking of Beyond Burger is cued by the smoky smell while cooking, which addresses the concern that healthy veggie burgers don't smell good. Okay, so now we've brought to life what that emotion is like, and notice that we're connecting the dots. We can now communicate internally in a standardized way, right? We're not using the word great like as the emotion smells great. We're connecting it into what the emotion is in a standard way through our emotions insights wheel, and we're connecting the dots between the cue and what concern a person has in life, what that really is addressing. Now I've got all the pieces and parts to understand how to take action against that. I can improve the smell. I know smoke character matters for Maggie. I can talk about how the aroma of this product is much more improved, and it's still healthy, et cetera, so forth. All right. Next one, let's talk about Han. Han's interesting. He is got a fiance, and he and his fiance are big Dr. Prager's fans, and they're using them all the time. And again, this is something where it's like, I really feel like I'm eating healthy when I eat this particular problem. It doesn't really come anywhere close a real burger. Now, granted, Han and his fiance don't eat meat very often to begin with, but he's has this ideal of what a real burger should be. They just don't go there because it's just not healthy enough for them, right? So what's interesting is the second part about this, where we get all the way to the very bottom here. He talks about how you know, regular burgers, just go into the pan and you fry them up, whereas plant-based, the Dr. Prager's, stick to the pan and they burn if you don't add oil. So he's talking about a process here that they have that he calls out as a negative experience he's currently having with his Dr. Prager's burgers. And he's kind of in conversation, kind of lumping other burgers just besides Dr. Prager's into that group as well. Okay, now when he got the Beyond Burger, he was, quote, shocked, right? It was the closest thing he'd ever eaten that wasn't meat, close resemblance to meat, talks about the texture, the taste, and then the last part here, it cooked up just like meat itself. No sticking to the pan, no oil needed, was very impressed with it. So interestingly enough, we want to focus in, now we can focus in on shock, right? That's a psychological surprise emotion, but I'm actually going to focus in on a different particular space. You know, I want to focus in on the functional space, which is it cooked up just like meat. No sticking or oil needed. I was very impressed with it. Okay, so what is that? What is that element? Well, it's clearly functional, right? No sticking to the pan. That's a very functional job that a product is doing here. So we can take a look at then, okay, well, what is the product? Is this about the experience as a whole, or is it just about one aspect or one quality of the product, right? He's talking about no oil being needed to cook. So he's talking about how this is changing his cooking process as a whole. So that's the experience, more the experience than it is just a specific aspect or characteristic of the product. So it's about how the product functions through the cooking process that is really driving his comment that he was really impressed with. So that means we've got three key emotions: enjoyment, fear that there would be something, and then relief that there wasn't, hope or disappointment. So we can look at each of these and would say, okay, well, enjoyment, that's liking a desirable or a pleasant event, right? Having an experience that was desirable. Fear relief, this is when you anticipate something bad and you actually get something better than your expectation. And hope and disappointment is where I was wanting something better, but I didn't get it. Okay, so which of these is the ones that the experience emotion that we think you got from this, or Han got from this particular one? Probably not disappointment, right? Because he was very impressed with it. So it wasn't hope, disappointment. So is it more, I was fearful that it would stick and I'm relieved that it didn't? Or is it more, wow, this is a wonderfully enjoyable experience? I'll leave that just hang for a second and let you think about it while we talk about the last part. We know that this is no sticking or oil needed in terms of the overall experience and what was driving him. So he's talking about some of the drivers here is that he wants a delightful or a positive cooking experience when he's making these products. So if we're looking at his experience as a whole, what we can say as we build out his emotions insight statement is it's probably more along simple enjoyment. He wasn't necessarily fearing the fact that it would stick, because sticking is normal to him. So it wasn't really a fear that it would. Like he wasn't going, oh my goodness, this looks like it's gonna stick. Then it would have been fear, right? Whereas here, he just like was shocked and surprised that something new happened, and was then saying, oh wow, this overall experience is very enjoyable because I didn't have to use oil, right? So he's got enjoyment with the cooking experience, no oils needed. And well, how does that connect? It's very clear that he believes that real meat doesn't stick to the pan, right? Therefore, and doesn't need oil in it. So we can then put this into that rubric and say enjoyment of the Beyond Burger cooking experience, because it's remember, this one's not just a product, so we'll talk about the experience as a whole. So the Beyond Burger cooking experience is cued by no need for oil, which aligns with the expectations that real burgers don't stick to the pan if oil isn't used. So we can put this now. Could you have crafted this statement in a different way? Absolutely. That's what the fun of being a researcher and writing insight statements all about. You put your own little signature on how you write it, how you bring it to life. And obviously, we're just talking about one emotion here. So you can take these open ends and put them into a lot of different types of outcome statements, a lot of different types of emotions, insight statements, just by looking at these one simple rubric. And part of the joy of doing research is being able to find these connective tissues. And it's those connective tissues between the concerns, expectations, how it's being communicated, the cues, as well as the emotion. When you put those all together, you've got something that really will pop off out of the research for you and make an impact within your organization. Now that's if we just focusing on open-end information. So all we're doing is taking person by person, quote by quote, and we're trying to identify, well, what is that person really talking about? And can I bring their personal opinion to life through an insight statement? You can also do this where you measure the emotions. So now we're going to talk about when you go into research and you actually run quantified emotions assessments. So one of the things that's important when we're looking at quantification and measuring emotions is, number one, you got to know why you're measuring them. You've got to make sure you go into research with a specific objective, not just go, hey, let's add emotions to this one. Well, why? What are you going to do with them? What are you going to use them for? If you learn something about an emotion, what actions would you take against your innovation? So why do you want to measure it? What specifically are you trying to measure, right? You don't have to just measure every possible emotions. There may be specific things you want to measure in your piece of research and how people are reacting. And then the next question is, how do you measure it? There's a lot of different emotional measurement techniques out there, tons. There's physiological, psychological, pictures, there's scales, there's lots of different techniques, lots of ways to measure emotions. But when it comes to innovation, one of the things that we found really, really impactful is you really have to go beyond people rationalizing their emotions. So we see this a lot, especially like in plant-based burger, where health is so important to people. They will, if you give them the opportunity, they will rationalize why they're having they'll rationalize a negative emotion into a positive one. So they will say, oh, this product tastes great, it's fine, it's wonderful, when in reality, their real emotion is actually, this is kind of disgusting. But they'll talk themselves into it being good, right? That's really true. Now, if you do implicit testing with emotions, you're going to see that negative impact. Whereas if you just throw scales at those same people, they'll say, well, where would I put my emotion? I'll put it here. So emotions are so fast and fleeting, you definitely want to grab an implicit measure to get there. All right, let's take a little bit more look at the case study then that we had with Beyond Burger and Current Burgers. When we did this, we had a fairly classic questionnaire. We wanted to get some of the traditional measures. So we had overall liking, 9-point scale, appearance liking, texture liking, et cetera, so forth. One of the things you notice when people have their current product, they like their current product. They also like Beyond Burger. In fact, there was no statistical differences between how well they liked the product that they use currently and how well they liked the new that they hadn't tried before, Beyond Burger. Now, there's a little difference in appearance liking and texture liking between them, but overall, right, they get very similar scores. So it's really only when it comes to the emotions that we start seeing some really radically different patterns. And what we wanted to understand with this study is, the why of emotions is, can I understand if people are going to change their behavior? So just saying I like it, both are equally liked, but could I impact them in a way that would make them have a better overall life experience, as well as then obviously you want to draw people. In this particular case, the goal would have been to draw people towards Beyond Burger. So let's talk about the implicit test a little bit, how it works. Fairly straightforward steps to the implicit test. Every single person is calibrated. So that means I've got to be able to figure out for Han, for Maggie, what is a fast reaction and what is a slow reaction time. What is an implicit reaction response and what is an explicit reaction response time for those people on the device they're using in that moment. That's really, really critical. If you're doing implicit work and you're just working with averages or ranks, which is what Insights Now used to do for many, many years, you're going to see a lot of anomalies in your data, and you're going to see a lot of false positives, quite honestly. And that's what we saw, and that was one of the reasons we built this particular test to be person by person specific, because we got a lot of false positives in our research when we were using averages and means within a data set and relative scoring. So calibration takes that all away. You get that person's speed for that moment in their life. Next piece that a lot of people miss in implicit research is the priming step. If all you do is just throw an implicit test at somebody, and you haven't primed them, you're going to have a ton of noise in your data, and you're going to get a lot of non-differences. So you always want to make sure that you throw a very clear priming step in. Now, that could be a product experience, it could be a concept, it could be them telling a specific story, but you need to have them focused, and you need everybody that you're going to be assessing collectively focused in that same way. Now, emotions are fast and fleeting, so while if you have the ability to do an implicit test while the emotion is being experienced, you don't need a projective step. But if you are trying to have an experience like eating a burger, your hands are tied, you can't be, it's really hard to answer a question at the same time you're cooking and eating and doing all that. you need to actually project your emotions onto something. And the most common psychology in this space is projecting it on a metaphorical image. So these are not rational images, they're completely metaphorical, contextual images. So you project your emotions on the image, and then you assess the particular image to get a sense of which implicit and explicit emotions were experienced by people. So how that comes about, if you really want to dig into the science of this, by the way, we've got a white paper, really detailed paper on our website, or you can just shoot me an email at the end and I'll send you that white paper as well. So how this looks for the participant, they've had their burger experience. The first thing you do is say, hey, pick an image that best captures your thoughts and feelings about the product. You're specifically focusing on the emotions. And they go through, they pick an image, and then we have them answer two open-ends questions, depending on how detailed information we want, one or both. The first is, why'd you pick the picture? And what happens in there is that they describe the most important things. And these most important things help them either contextualize their emotions and it primes them to be able to answer the emotions questions really well. And then secondarily, we say, describe the image itself. And what happens here is this is where you get some of those subconscious cues coming forward. So they'll often relate to specific elements. They may call out a color or a pattern or a texture or a flavor or an aroma or something along those lines, something contextual that is helping connect their emotions, right? So remember, you have those concerns, the stimulus, the expectations, remember that appraisal process. This is what often shows up underneath this open end. And then finally, we go through an implicit explicit assessment where you're flashing key semiotics, in this case, keywords at people: happy, sad, surprised, etc., so forth. And you're just saying, did you experience this emotion? Yes or no. And via the calibration, I know based on how fast they answer, whether that was an implicit reaction to that word or whether it was an explicit reaction to that word. If it slowed them down, they went, I don't know if I feel happy, or if they went, yeah, feel happy. All right, now the pictures, we get asked a lot about the pictures. The pictures are metaphors. The pictures themselves have absolutely no emotion expected. So if you asked a person to describe the specific emotion of an image, it's irrelevant. When we've done replication work with this and repeatability work with this approach, what you see is that people answer the emotions, implicit questions the same, but they'll pick different images. The image really isn't, the specific image they pick doesn't really matter as long as it's metaphorical and not like hyper rational. So as long as you take out images of burgers and cheese and sauces and buns and stuff, and you have no food images in here, as long as you're taking all those rational images out of a set of images, you can use these metaphor-based images to get a good projection. Now, the other thing that's great about those images, though, is that you can use those to help bring stories to life, right? We often put collages together, overlay quotes with people. But more importantly, in the measure side, we're looking at different types of metrics. Specifically, one of the overall metrics that we like to look at is an emotions score. So we're going to take the data that comes from this, whether they answered yes or no, and whether it was a fast or slow answer. And we're going to transform that into a 100-point scale. So what happens here is that means that if the score is 0, that means 100% of the people said no fast. So it was an implicit no, absolutely don't feel that. If it was a score of 100, that's 100% of the people saying absolutely feel that, super fast answer, very implicit reaction to that particular emotion. Okay, so anywhere in between, scores above 75, those are very, very strong positive, right? Most people have an implicit yes answer. Scores below 25, most of the people have a implicit no answer to those responses. Okay. So in the Beyond Burger study, we see that there are some really key emotional differences between the products. Both of them provided similar levels of calm, relaxed, satisfaction. The Beyond Burger delivered a lot more happiness. That's the word we use. We talked about enjoyment when we were doing the open ends. we use the word happy because enjoyment's kind of a weird word for consumers to use. So the word happy it fits that very, very well. And we see a big bump for Beyond Burger. A lot more people were implicitly happy with that than they were with their current product. More people excited with Beyond than with the current. And then one thing that's important about this as well is the negative side. So this is some of those subtle subconscious things we were talking about before that you get out of emotion implicit work that you often will not see at all when you're doing scaled work with emotions. So here you've got definite increase in the percentage of people with their current product. Remember, this is the product they're currently using that are unsatisfied, bored, disappointed, and tired when they use that particular product. Whereas we didn't see that with the Beyond Burger. So if we want to bring those emotions to life, we can put emotions insight statements that are more aggregate across all of the data that we have from this, and we can bring that to life with some of the key metrics. So for instance, I can talk about that negative side and say disappointment with the current plant-based burgers is skewed by the lack of real meat appearance, aroma, and cooking experience, which makes people believe they have to compromise their ideal burger experience to eat healthier. So we can talk about what that negative emotion is doing, and we pull in all of the open-ended information as well as the data itself to say, well, why is that happening? Why am I seeing higher disappointment with current burgers than I am with the Beyond Burger? And we can pull that together. And again, using that rubric, we're connecting the dots, right? You have disappointment, that's the emotion. Current plant-based burgers, that's a projection, right? Lack of real meat experience, those are the key cues. And then what does that matter to them in life, right? Compromising their ideal burger experience to eat healthier, right? So you're using that same format. Obviously, this is embellished around that, but using those same four elements to bring together a sentence that really brings that emotion insight to life. Likewise, we can do the positive side, right? Happy, we saw that happiness was much higher with the Beyond Burger than with current. And we could say, okay, well, why? So happiness with the Beyond Burger experience is cued by the real meat aroma and cooking experience, which makes people believe they're eating a burger that is closer to their real meat ideal experience. And remember, in this particular case, we're getting to start with the fact that using the insights wheel, we would say, okay, I know happiness/enjoyment is not a product specific element, but it's about the overall experience that a person is having. So I'm going to look for cues that are less product qualities oriented and more experience oriented to help explain what this is all about. All right, hopefully those show you some really simple examples as to how you can bring some of this information to life and really then bringing you back to a full understanding of this full emotional intelligence component piece here. So great inventions, really great inventions are always focused on changing people's lives for the better. And to do this, we have to have fantastic empathy for the people who are using the products and services, but we also need to learn how to communicate that to our team. And that's what today was about, is helping you learn what that is looking like. So if we look at how we get to emotional intelligence, right? The emotions insights wheel and the eliciting conditions help you understand what emotions are and how they come to life. Then if we look at measuring emotions, make sure you're pulling in that qualitative layer. That's going to help you a ton. And make sure you're using that qualitative to dig into what's meaningful in their life and you're getting depth to those stories. And then if you're quantifying those, focus on implicit based measures, because implicit explicit testing gives you information that you just don't get with scale based responses or choice based responses. And then finally applying that, connect the emotion to the cue. That's my core advice to everybody, is like, how do I make it simple? Connect the emotion to what's causing that emotion, right? And understand why that matters to a person in life. So write emotions insight statements. Try it. Go grab your latest piece of innovation research. Grab some of those open ends. See if you can identify those four elements in the qualities that people talk about. If you can't, hypothesize maybe based on the patterns that you were seeing across everybody, what could have been that information, right? So go there. If you don't have innovation work, go to Amazon's website and read a really nice long review of a product. Pick your favorite personal product. Go read a bunch of reviews on that and see if you can identify what emotion is that person talking about. What is it being cued by? Are they talking about the experience or product quality, right? So find those elements, practice a little bit. The more you practice, the better you'll get, the more it'll be very intuitive for you to see that information and see those patterns and be able to communicate them in a strong, successful way. All right, so that is what I've got for you today. Looking forward to additional questions from you. I've got a few here that I was not able to get to while I was talking through. I I wanted to talk. I always get questions on the images and what makes the images and how we pick the images. And one of the key questions really is like, hey, are they random? Do you have a design? Our particular image bank does have a design to it. What we tried to do is look at all of the design elements. Are there circles? Are there shapes? Are all the colors represented, et cetera, so forth. So we looked at the design parameters for design thinking and said, okay, let's make sure we have a set of images that do that. Second, then, for every piece of research, we go through that image bank and we take out anything that we think could be super rational. So if we have something that we're doing with food, we take out every image that's food related. If we have, let's say we're doing something with fragrances, we'll take out all the pictures of flowers, right? Those just go straight away because so many people associate a specific aromas with fragrances. If we know what that fragrance is supposed to smell like, we'll take away any image where that particular characteristic is present in that particular aroma. So we make sure that the image bank is metaphor based and not rational based. And that's super important. You could use anything. I mean, you could use ink blots, you could use any type of imagery that really forces a person to be metaphorical in their approach, because it's really a projective technique. Our image bank, we just went out and grabbed public images that are on the list of allowed to be reused areas. We have decks of cards we use when we're in person with people that we bought from Creative Learning Institute. So there's lots of ways you can go with different images. And I think that, are they presented, let's see, what is that? Are they presented randomly or in some special order? Yes, we have a random presentation. Realistically, we haven't seen, we've talked with a lot of people about this as exits when they do studies. And for the most part, because these are metaphors, people aren't going very far into the deck. Like if I give them all 165 images, they're usually picking an image pretty quick through. There's only a very small group of people who are like really trying to find, like they have an image in mind and they're trying to find that type of image. Most people are not approaching it that way because these are metaphors, not explicit. And most of the people trying to find a specific image are looking for something explicit. So we do random presentation, random order, and that's that design. But the whole point is to get them to a point where if you're doing implicit work, emotions happen so fast, doing that projection really helps people be able to make that transformation between what was my experience and now how am I rating myself. Okay, do we see bimodal data, transformation of data, et cetera, so forth? Oh, that is a fantastic question. I actually did a webinar on that specific topic. So I have a webinar, you can hit our website. It's, what is it called? 3 patterns that you must look for in implicit data. And it actually goes through a few more than 3. It's a little bit of a misnomer, I think, on the title. But yeah, it goes through all the possible patterns that you could actually find in implicit. So if you have fast yes, fast, no, slow, yes, slow, no. What types of patterns are you going to see, and what's the meaning of those patterns? Why would those patterns happen? What does it mean when you have those patterns? Bimodality is definitely common when you're going through this, and bimodality comes from a couple of different scenarios. Bimodality comes from just the population being different, like Beyond Burger. There's some elements in there. If you dug deep, you would see there's some bimodality. There's lovers and haters, right? And then on some of the things that are surprising, like some things based on people's current experiences were like the no oil piece was a good example. For some people, that was a radical surprise. Never had anything not stick for me before, but for a lot of people that have been trying a lot of different products, there's like, yeah, that's not surprising at all. I've had plenty of others that didn't stick. So it's those experiences definitely become bimodal when you have uh, back 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 experiences, which is why it's so important in the research to prime people to get their history right. You want to know what their past experiences are, what memories are they bringing to the table, and why is that important. If I just saw a difference there, I wouldn't know what the value of that bimodality is if I hadn't gathered all that past information, right? And or I'd have to go out again and try and figure out why I saw that. But yeah, emotions work, very fascinating, lots of different patterns to look for. Sometimes we don't use the 100-point scale. Sometimes we just use like the percentage of people who have a specific implicit response. Like if I'm trying to really wow people, like I want them to pick up a product and the first thing they do when they see that package is go, whoa, then I'm just counting the specific number of people. What percentage of people had that reaction? How many people had a first glance uh, uh, pleasant surprise when they saw the package? So you can use the data. That's part of that understanding why you're measuring it and what data is going to support that. A lot of different great ways to do it. But yeah, definitely go check out that webinar. It's good information in that one. You'll see a bunch of patterns that'll help you understand how to look at implicit data. All right. Any other, how well does it work in non-food? Yeah, great question. We apply implicit across the board, lots of different areas. I mean, we've applied it to, goodness, fragrances, personal care, like mouthwash and goodness, home care products. We've applied it to over-the-counter medicines, to foods, fabric. So yeah, it gets applied in a lot of different ways. It's extremely extensible. I guess building on that, it's also cross-cultural. You just got to get the language right. But the actual technique, you don't see like scalar oriented differences here because nobody's using a scale. It's just a yes, no. So because of that, you see really good extensibility. It's also great for inclusivity because yes, no is a way easier thing to do than figure out what a scale is. So from an inclusivity standpoint, it's a much easier task. So it's got a lot of good extensibility that way. The words you pick really do matter though. So you really do have to put some work and effort into picking the right emotion words for that culture that you're working on, which is why the foundations all come back to be valuable. All right. I don't see any other questions I didn't already cover. So with that, I thank you all. If you have any questions for me, feel free to write me, gregsookie@insightsnow.com. Give me a ring. Look me up on LinkedIn. I'm there too. Whatever you would like. But feel free to go and pull information. If you want other examples or other case studies, let me know. Glad to take you through those examples. If you struggle, like if you go and try and write these emotions insight statement and go, man, I just can't get it, give me a call. Let me help you. I'll take you through a few more. Maybe I can find out what's zipping through your head, and maybe I can give you some rubrics that I didn't show you today that maybe are more applicable to your situation. All right, have a fantastic rest of your day. Look forward to seeing you on a future webinar.